Hello, everyone, and welcome to Global Ready Conference. I hope you've been enjoying the day thus far. My name is Kyle Rubb. I'm a Senior Customer Success Manager here at Smartling, and I'm honored to have Ace and Yoni joining me today to talk about how their efforts and use of Smartling are helping to scale localization for their companies. So would love to start with a brief introduction. Could you each give a quick intro and tell us about your roles at GoFundMe and at Lightricks?
My name is Ace Yamaguchi. I work for GoFundMe right now. I lead all of the localization efforts at GoFundMe. That is basically product, legal, customer support, and marketing. There's a lot of different content type that we actually translate via SmartLink, and I'm very happy to be here.
And Yoni?
So I'm Yoni Sildri. I've been working at Lightricks for 4.5 years for a company that mostly creates tools for content creators. At Lightricks, I'm also in charge of basically all the localization and translation efforts. I work mostly with our in-house UX writers, but also with all kinds of different stakeholders from other departments.
Awesome. Great. Happy to have you both. Let's get started with just discussing some of the connectors and integrations that you use with SmartLing. Why don't we start with you, Yoni?
Yeah, thanks. So for us, I have to say the biggest and most useful integration that we have in place is the GitHub connector. Most of our current translation and localization work goes really into our products, and that's all managed through GitHub. So the integration really allows the relevant stakeholders, whether they're developers or UX writers, to really manage, request content, and do everything straight from GitHub, which is really useful. We also use the Slack integration, which is, again, just makes life simpler in terms of communication mostly. And again, our stakeholders are just able to communicate, whether it was with the translators or with other people, through that Slack integration, which is really useful too.
Great, glad to hear that. And how about you, Ace? Are there particular connections or integrations and connectors that GoFundMe uses?
Yeah, Cal. We use a couple connectors at GoFundMe. One, we use the Zendesk connector to actually translate all of our help articles or support articles. And also we definitely have a Slack integration, as Yoni has, so that all of the translators could ask questions throughout our ecosystem. We also have a WordPress connector that basically translates all of our marketing websites. So that also helps get content translated quickly. Mm-hmm. So those are the two connectors that we use currently. We are experimenting with other connectors right now to make sure that we can translate content smoothly and efficiently as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. So a few different integrations, different tools being used among both companies here. You both mentioned the Slack integration, so maybe we can focus on that for a moment. How do you consider the Slack integration as a way to manage communication with translators, part of your scalability process or your scaling goals?
I can take that. So I think the first part really relates to something that I mentioned a few moments ago, which is any stakeholder, different team members that I just onboard to SmartLing can really, whether it's communicating with me or our translators, can do that from our native chat app. And that's like, in terms of scalability, I'd say just the ease in which new team members are able to just get more familiar with the platform, and also to just communicate regarding issues or any other kinds of requests.
Great.
Yeah, for us, the Slack integration gives us the flexibility of actually connecting the content owner to the actual translators. And also it gives us a way of not creating accounts in SmartLink for every person that needs to answer on the Slack. So that's really cool. We also have different channels, Slack channels for different projects, which also helps like have noises in the Slack channel sometimes. So the only question that really need to be answered are actually hosted on those Slack channels.
Awesome. And for some of the other integrations that you're using, GitHub, Zendesk, WordPress, are there particular features in these connectors, these integrations that are also supporting your company's growth and scaling, specifically in localization efforts?
Yeah, so these connectors that SmartLink provides help us definitely not do any manual upload, download of content through SmartLink. It's seamlessly integrated with the actual content or CMS, which helps streamline the process. Also, the time that takes the translation to get back to the content, to the source content, definitely helps in terms of scalability. It also, in the sense of us trying to get to more of a self-service model where the content owner could request translations and not through the localization team. This also helps in terms of having, scalability for each content owner to be able to request translations from their systems.
Great. And Yoni, I know you mentioned that there are a few different teams, different content types. Sounds like potentially all using the GitHub connector. Do you find that it's flexible and supports the different needs? How does the GitHub connector support your growth?
Yeah, so for us, most of our content goes into the product. So most of the people involved in that process and use the GitHub integration are also either developers or UX writers who are under product at our company. I think that the easiest part is the way it allows different developers from different teams to manage and stay on top of the content they're in charge of, but when everything still goes through GitHub. In regards to our other departments, we have marketing, legal, and customer experience team. We actually don't have integrations in place for all of them. Our next step will probably be following base and adding the Zendesk integration, which is going to be a big improvement for our customer experience team. Mostly, I guess, because it just allows them, it will allow them to manage all the content from one place. And again, like Ace mentioned in regards to the Slack integration, that you don't necessarily have to add every person to SmartLink. That's another solution on top of that.
Great. And I know GoFundMe in particular also makes use of one of our services, our managed services team, which is a bit of a white glove service. So I'd be interested to hear, Ace, how that team has had an impact on GoFundMe's localization strategy.
Yeah, thank you. The managed service definitely helps us scale our translation process. Also, because SmartLink has all of the translators for all the different languages available, that helps us not try to find any translators also. And also, when we have to experiment with new languages, that also helps us use SmartLink language services as well, or managed service as well. The other piece that we actually use for SmartLink language service is all of the job management aspect of it. And if one jobs are late, the managed service will be able to basically ping the translator and ensure that the jobs are done in a timely manner.
Thank you. So there's definitely a theme of centralization, which leads us right into a question from one of our participants. They say, we're having a hard time getting leadership on board to centralize some of our vendors. Any advice on how to get buy-in from leadership that's hesitant to centralize? So I think you've already touched on quite a few things here, but I'd be interested to hear what you have to say to someone who's looking for some more reasoning to convince their leadership to centralize services.
Sure. The centralization of translation versus decentralization is always a topic of a lot of different companies. I feel having there's a couple good parts of having content centralized. One is the leverage of translation memory. which makes your content more consistent across all of the content types. That itself is a big plus in terms of having the same messaging for any content that you produce. So if you have a marketing page or a support page or a product page that you want to be using the same content or translations for any of the words that you are translating. So that's, I think I'll probably start from there. Second is cost, definitely in terms of centralizing. You will probably get much better leverage in cost in terms of centralized translation management system. Third is, you could do a QBR on the content on a regular basis and kind of show proof that you are actually making good efficient use by having a centralized translation system. I don't know, Yoni, you have anything to add?
It's hard to add to that, to be honest. Maybe I could just, it really depends on, I guess, the leadership in that sense, but we really like, making data-driven decisions. So something that we really like to do is just run experiments to, especially when we want to try something in a new market or with a specific language. So it's very simple to run some kind of A/B test, one variant with the existing text or localization, and then another variant with the other one, and just to monitor that. For the number lovers, I guess.
Great. I'm a number lover myself, so I love hearing that. Awesome. A couple more questions from some of our audience here. How do you prioritize which content to sync with a connector first? So I suppose just in terms of prioritizing content source, whether it's a marketing content, support content, which I know both of you think a lot about, product content, web content, et cetera. This may go to the translation memory factor that you mentioned, Ace. Is there any particular strategy that you might recommend in terms of prioritizing content, prioritizing your integrations that you have in place?
Yeah, it's definitely something you think about, but it kind of naturally happens as when you have a manual process and that process gets so overburdened that you really need to do something about it. So that's kind of what happens with our WordPress connector or even Zendesk, right? That you have a lot of content that coming through and your localization team are not able, even with managed service, you're not able to push through all the content in a timely manner. Then you really need to look at different solution, and connector definitely, SmartLink connector definitely helps in terms of shrinking that manual task into almost zero. So that's sort of how I will prioritize, like how much content you're actually, sending through, and how much overhead your localization team is actually costing you. And that, but with those two data, I think you could make a good, wise decision on which connector you really need.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yoni, does that reflect somewhat your experience, of course, working with GitHub with your product content first and now potentially expanding to using the Zendesk integration, just a little bit out of necessity and a little bit out of the volume of content?
Yeah, pretty much exactly that. What I mentioned about the manual processes, I don't think we've gotten really to the point where we have specific things in place that we really need to automate at this point. We're designing this mostly based on the volume, which for us started with product, but as you can see, and especially as the company wants to grow and scale, it's just becoming more relevant in all of these aspects.
Excellent. Great. And one last question from our audience today, which I think you both certainly have touched on a bit, but always kind of comes up. Did your colleagues take well to you enabling them with SmartLinks? So basically granting users access and pivoting to that sort of self-serve experience that Ace was describing? Or have you had instances where they still prefer for you to manage their localization requests for them? Has that impacted your growth in any way?
I'll start. So I'd say that overall, most of my colleagues were happy to join the funnel, but over time it really again depends on the volume. So we have the heavy hitters, those who really want to take more actions and be more involved in the process. And they can say are really enjoying using SmartLink and having the option to control and manage the content and monitor really each step. But of course, people who don't use it as frequently may prefer to get my assistance for that.
Yeah, for us, definitely. When you tell them you could get your content faster if you use SmartLink, definitely, they're usually on board of actually using SmartLink. Second, they actually see the value by using SmartLink, and be able to communicate content, even for the project manager who actually starts the job to get the translation started. I think it helps them manage their workload as well by having access to SmartLink. One example we had a legal translation done. We actually trained the legal vendor to actually use SmartLink, and they actually liked it because they did not like doing edits on a Word file. So it was better to actually doing edits in SmartLink to be able to get all of the changes that they needed. And actually for us, that streamlined a lot of process, because before we had to manually edit back to SmartLink of all the correction that they did. So it was a win-win case.
Great. Yes, we love to hear that. It's easier for the service provider. It's easier for the content owner. I think that is, the nexus of the scalability. The question of scalability, we want to make it easier and easier for everyone to use, easier for everyone to grow as well. So I think that's a great note to wrap up on. We're just at the end of our time. Thank you both so much for your participation today and sharing your insights on scalability and your use of SmartLink. We really appreciate your time, and we're very happy to have you as SmartLink customers. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of Global Ready Conference.
Great. Thank you.